My God, that is a brilliant scene. It's so brilliant. I don't even. And then these fanboys are so. They so annoy me because they think they know what they're talking about and they know bloody nothing. Oh, it's too much like the Joker. Oh, he's playing the Riddler. He's not playing Lex Luthor. Let me explain something to you. Lex Luthor is not a thing, okay? Neither is the Joker, okay? The Lex Luthor is. There are three things that are true of all Lex Luthors that have come along. He is a genius. He's got a very scientific mind. And he hates Superman because he's jealous of the fact that Superman has this power that he hadn't earned. It's just a power, essentially godly powers that he hadn't earned through any effort of his own. It's just given to him as by nature. And as far as Lex Luthor is concerned, that power ought be his. And that power, he knows that if he had that power, he'd be corrupted. So he thinks Superman must be corrupted. That simple. That is all that Lex Luthor is. Any way that a writer chooses to depict those three central themes, Lex Luthor's feelings towards Superman, which I've just outlined, the fact he's a genius and has a kind of scientific mind, any way a writer chooses, I could write a Lex Luthor who was a 7-year-old child who was just a genius, so brilliant as a 7-year-old, so way beyond that he's almost got the mind beyond, adults, and then Superman comes along and he feels that somehow that you can take Lex Luthor any which way you want. You can make Lex Luthor a woman. As long as you keep those essential parts of the character. And what they've cleverly done here, and I do get it, sometimes he went over the top and it maybe didn't suit the tone of the movie, but remember this, just a short in between. If they had have gone with the suave, businessman, thoughtful, stoic Lex Luthor that you had in the animated series and that you had in Smallville, which is what most of these supposed comic book fans are referring to when they say, oh, I know who Lex Luthor is and I know what he's supposed to be like and he's not supposed to be like that. If they had have gone with that, how would you distinguish Lex Luthor from Bruce Wayne? They would have been almost identical. It would have been very, very hard to make that kind of stoic version of Lex Luthor be so different from the Bruce Wayne you had in this movie. They would have been virtually the same character, and the tonally it would have been these three boring white guys, like Superman's stoic and whatever, and then you have Lex Luthor who's just a little bit of a genius but still stoic, and then you've got Batman who's damaged and crazy and stoic. You couldn't have had that. So you had to have Lex Luthor have a different vibe. And what they did is they went with the birthright Lex Luthor, and I'll show you now. They went with the version of Lex Luthor that you find in Red Son. So now you can see what I'm talking about when I say that this was a Lex Luthor that we've seen in comics. You can see from that Red Son clip that this is a version of Lex Luthor that we've seen from the comics. So it does not stray far. It was very, very comic related. And I thought what was interesting is People say this guy was like the Joker. He was trying to pull off a Heath Ledger, like Dark Knight, because he was twitching a little bit. People don't understand. They actually switched around what would be expected of these characters. They did a very clever thing with Lex Luthor and the Joker, because they've always been, much like Superman and Batman, two sides of the same coin. So they made the Joker in the Dark Knight, they made him a psychopath. Now, there's a distinction between a psychopath and a sociopath. They've made Lex Luthor in this movie a sociopath. Now, with a psychopath, what you have is a person much like, if you're familiar with, you know, these kind of psychopath serial killers, or these people who've been diagnosed with psychopathy, like Bernie Madoff. You have the kind of sophisticated, or sorry, not sophisticated. You have somebody who is charismatic and able to hide under a veil, essentially, of sanity, and be able to charm people and lead people and manipulate people very, very effectively, because of how socially adept they are, how able to mirror normal people's behavior that they are, and how charismatic they are. Now, what in the Dark Knight, what the Joker was almost a, you know, a kind of a Manson-like psychopath. Charles Manson was a very, very good example of a psychopath, somebody who was able to lead other people because of his extraordinary charisma, okay, and lead them to do savage things, and convince them of bizarre philosophies and bizarre ideas, because he was so you know, he knew people and was able to read people and profile people and use that kind of against them. Then and someone like Ted Bundy is very, very similar in that sense. Then there's the other type, which is the sociopath. Now, the sociopath is more, and you can look this up, the sociopath is more like Ed Gaines. This is a guy who stands out. There's something wrong with him, and people know it. You know, they can see it. They may not, you know, this is a guy, when he turns around and you find out that he, you know, killed a couple of people, people aren't surprised. They may not have been like, oh yeah, that's definitely, that guy's a killer. But when they find out about it, they're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That guy really did seem like he was screwed up. Yeah, that's the one. You know, and that's what Lex Luthor is in this. Lex Luthor is that type of guy. You know, the senator finds out Lex Luthor is responsible for doing some weird criminal stuff, you know, and she's like, yeah, I pretty much figured. You know, everyone who finds out about Lex Luthor, even the general who finds out about Lex Luthor, who gives Lois Lane the smoking gun to tell her that what Lex Luthor has been up to. Even he's not surprised that Lex Luthor is, you know, he's that type of person. He's a sociopath. He's so mentally unstable in terms of his behavior that people notice it. And they notice that there's something wrong with him. They notice his distance away from the rest of humanity. But the great thing about this is he's the kind of sociopath who's more like, I would put him in the kind of same level as the Unabomber. Yeah, the Unabomber, exactly. Ted Kaczynski. I might put a little clip of him up. This guy was a genius, brilliant genius. Went to Berkeley College, and just was mathematically so gifted, but he could not make or form relationships with people because he was just such a genius. And it brought him and it distanced him further and further and further away from society. And he started sending out bombs to Berkeley because he felt rejected by them. And, you know, eventually it was his brother who, you know, read some kind of manifesto he sent to a newspaper, and his brother turned him in. He said he read this manifesto. So his own brother wasn't surprised that that, you know, that Ted was was this kind of murderer, serial kind of killer guy. His own brother was like, recognized it and was like, yeah, that's probably Ted. That's the kind of sociopath that Lex Luthor is playing. That's the kind of nuance that that Jesse brings to this performance, and he uses all these kind of philosophical musings and references, and you know, like when I love that bit on the roof that we just saw, where he just goes, you know, you put he says something. I'll show it to you. Forget it. Yeah, and he does that, and it's like you can see the wheels turning in his head, but Superman has no idea what he's talking about. What's he talking about? You send something to something to Batman, and it's like you killed your family and blah blah. But all of that is a brilliant master plan to get these guys to in the end, you know, to come into conflict. So this guy is a real genius. And when you look at the plan that he has, even the Granny's peach tea, when you look at the plan he has, it was very Lex Luthor. And I mean, as much as I will defend Jesse Eisenberg's performance, I do think other people could have done this a little bit better. But I think Jesse Eisenberg, I thought he was good. I thought he was very good. And he surprised me a hell of a lot, probably more than anybody in this movie. The only thing I enjoyed more than him was Wonder Woman. The only thing I enjoyed more than him was Wonder Woman. And I liked him because he was the type of villain you really hated. You know, I didn't like this guy. And that's what you're supposed to feel towards Lex Luthor. The Joker's a kind of villain that you like. And I think that's another thing that people are mistaking their feelings towards Jesse Eisenberg with this. Because they're thinking, they feel like, you know, with the Joker, you kind of like him, and with the other DC villains, you kind of like them, and you should kind of want to like Lex Luthor. But Lex Luthor isn't that type of villain. Lex Luthor's just a twat. He is the most superficial, you know, this is a guy who, if he put his mind to it, could cure cancer, could rob the world of, rid the world of so many ills and iniquities. You know, you just saw him when in that Red Sun scene where he's just like, oh, here's the thing to balance the budget, you know. That's the kind of guy he is, and he could do that anytime he wants, but instead he's just so obsessed with some guy because he's the only guy in the world who's superior to him. This is a petty individual, and you know, Jesse Eisenberg made him even more despicably hateable. At least in the comics, you kind of find him a little bit like, that's quite cute the way he just hates Superman like that. That's quite funny. But this version is like, I straight up did not like him. I had a distaste for him. Every time he came on screen, he made my skin crawl, and I liked it. I liked that. That is a very different and interesting take on Lex Luthor, and we've got to stop thinking that these we have to stop with this entitlement oh, we have this idea, it's got to be Bryan Cranston. If it isn't Bryan Cranston, then it's shit. You've got to stop with that entitlement. It's bullshit. You know, sometimes these guys get it wrong. Sometimes maybe even this they got wrong. Maybe it's so irritating that people can't deal with Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But when you start saying the writing was bad and he was like the Joker and all of this kind of thing, it just makes me feel you don't know what you're talking about. You either haven't read the comics, because that is not, even if he was bad, that is not the Joker. That's nothing like the Joker. Nothing he said is something that the Joker would say. All of it, the references to books like Lolita, the references to Zeno's paradoxes, the references to the paradox of evil, this kind of philosophical, none of it was anything the Joker would say. So if you say that, that makes me think that you don't know what you're talking about. So that's my bit on Lex Luthor, and that's a bit of a rant. I might have to cut that up a bit and edit that up a bit, and then put it together as a separate video as well, depending on what I decide to do. But let's try and get through the rest of these quite quickly. Now, there's a lot of people who say the Batman v Superman is kind of boring because of the pretentious philosophical musings. I mean, really, dude? Really? Is that? I mean, okay. I'll go on a kind of, you know, just straight out say this. I studied philosophy at university, and some of the things that came up in this film were things that we talk about in philosophy class, that lecturers were writing books on, that, you know, obviously it glossed over them because it's a movie, it can't go into a lecture about it, but essentially these were ideas that have been discussed since, you know, ancient Greek philosophers were walking around. You know, it's bizarre to me that you could say it's pretentious. I don't think there's anything pretentious about it. Whether whether the question of if God exists and he's all powerful, how can there be evil in the world? I think that's a rather interesting question. The fact that they don't try and answer it because no one can answer it, you know, those kind of questions that come up in the movie are absolutely fine. They're thought-provoking and they're interesting, and they were thrown into the movie sparsely and at the right times. And I think as again, hats off to the writer, the way they wrote Lex Luthor, because he was philosophical, he was demented, he was evil, and he was always kind of throwing some kind of theological kind of ideas into the general narrative that I thought were very fun and interesting, and he did it in a funny way, and it was clever. So the philosophical side of it, I thought was very interesting. I thought that was a good on them. Brave move. And cinema audiences should have been happy that a big blockbuster movie like that, Batman v Superman itself, was actually attempting in some way to make you think. You'd think that you'd appreciate that. I don't know. Whatever. Dream sequences, too many. Yeah, I agree with this. I believe the dream sequences should have been saved for the ultimate cut, because that was really for the fans. It didn't add to the narrative. I think they should have. I mean, with the Dawn of Justice thing, would the Trinity fight have been enough at the end to symbolize Dawn of Justice? Or would they have to have had, like, they could have just put one more cameo in, I don't know. Victor Stone playing at the football game could have done it, but like as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the dream sequences for, because as I told you, I fell asleep. And the second time I watched the movie in the cinema and I tried to watch it with the trailers and everything, I fell asleep. It was too goddamn long and something had to go. And I can't think of anything. You know, I'm sure he was so proud of Direct because it was a beautiful sequence, all of that stuff in the desert, and he probably really didn't want to take it out. But to me, the film would have been more coherent if he had have added in all that stuff of Superman trying to find out about Batman, and had have added that stuff of the stuff in the desert before to flesh out Lex Luthor's plan and all of that. If you take out every kind of dream sequence in the movie, you could have had that, and you could have had a much more linear movie, and I think it would have been a better experience. Personally, I think it would have been. I think that would have been a bet. I think that would be the best version of the movie. Take out the dream sequences, put those in instead. But having said that, I think the dream sequence was very beautiful and very beautifully shot. Maybe you could have had it as a short movie or something like that before, like put it in the cinema as like a trailer, like a really really long kind of trailer for Batman v Superman. I think like as a short film that would have worked really really well, and then added it to the ultimate cut the way he wanted it after. But those dream sequences, man, I'm sure that I know about Darkseid, I know about all of that kind of stuff. I'm sure it had the audience baffled. I think they could have left in the bit with the Flash coming through the portal, though. I think that could have been left in, and maybe done something a little bit shorter with the dream sequence. I don't know, but anyway, that's my view on the dream sequence. So as I said, you can see I am being fair. Where I see problems with the movie, I am being fair. So I'm not just like fanboying out and giving excuse after excuse for everything in the movie. Okay, the Martha scene. Now, this is one of the things. I'm going to say two things about the Martha scene. Now, there's two aspects to this. Now, one, we've got people who mock this scene, and they mock the very, very idea of it. I'm not going to go over again because it's so bloody obvious. I think only someone who is wanting to hate this movie or just is stupid. I don't know. You either want to hate this movie and you want to troll and you want to pile on, because if you don't understand this, especially people who say they're Batman fans, if you don't understand this scene and why Batman decides after hearing Superman say, save Martha, if you don't understand that scene as a Batman fan, and I'm not even like the biggest Batman fan. Like he's one of my, he's as I said, apart from of the Trinity, he's probably the least favorite of the Trinity of mine. If I were really, really to look at it, I like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman as my favorite superheroes, but he's probably just slightly the least. But even so, I'm not a huge comic reader of all of them. You know, I haven't read every single kind of incarnation of like Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman. I've read quite a bit, but you know, there are fans who are like crazy over Batman. They've read like everything, and they're saying, "Oh wow, that Martha scene, I don't understand," or they claim to have read everything. I don't know if they actually have. Now, to me, I'm just like, it's very, very clear and obvious what the Martha scene is trying to do. Now, this is the second bit of this. I think it's very, very poorly executed. And I'm going to explain why it's poorly executed. Okay, so the first thing is is, clearly we all know, stop trolling, stop pretending you don't understand. Even if you didn't understand it while you were watching the movie, stop being so stubborn. You know exactly why the Martha scene, in terms of Batman stopping the fight because of the, of what Superman said in that particular moment. You know exactly why that makes sense. The film sets it up perfectly in the beginning, even though I didn't want to see another scene of Batman's parents being killed, and I thought that scene in the beginning where Batman's parents are killed is so ridiculous, and what a redundant use of two great actors as well, just to play Martha and Thomas Wayne and get shot just like that. What a waste of that actor, you know. Unless they're going to do a storyline where Thomas Wayne in an alternate world becomes the Batman and she becomes the Joker, like in the Flashpoint Paradox. What a complete waste of those two actors to do just a little vignette of getting shot. Like, I'm not even going to get angry about that. But anyway, they set it up. You know, the last thing he hears after, his parents get shot is, Martha. You know, the father saying Martha. And we all know that Batman ultimately, if he could go back and do something about it so his parents don't get shot and he doesn't have to become Batman and he doesn't go into become this, vengeful, vengeful kind of avenger of the night. He would go back and, erase all of that and just live happily with his parents. He regrets that he wasn't able to do anything, and that's why he's put on the bat. And everyone knows this. I don't even know why I'm saying all of these words, because you know it, and you know that is the reason, and you're just being stubborn because maybe you didn't get it in the time in the cinema, and now you get it, but you don't want to admit you're wrong. You're wrong. It makes complete sense why Batman turned on it. Now, was it effectively, and why Batman stopped the fight? Now, was it effectively done as a scene? No. No, it was not effectively done as a scene. Too many dumb things about it. Why would Superman call his mother Martha? He loves his mother. He's got such a good, touching relationship with his mother. Why is he calling his mother Martha? It makes no sense. That's just another Zack Snyder thing. He just does these Zack Snydery things, and it's so annoying because he could make it perfectly fine and it all makes sense, but he just Snyders it. You can see now I'm not a massive fan of Snyder's, oversights in filmmaking. So again, I'm being fair. I just think this film is, all in all, really, really great in some areas. Really great, and much, much more interesting filmmaking than Civil War. Okay? So, the Martha, because you can talk about this. No one can talk about Civil War the way I'm talking about Batman v Superman. No one can talk about, because there's nothing of interest in it. There's nothing that bad and there's nothing that good. It's just there. You can't analyze it. There's nothing to analyze. You can analyze this movie because it's interesting, and it has interesting themes, and it has interesting decisions that it decides to make, that are most often controversial and challenging to the viewer. You couldn't do this about Civil War because it doesn't warrant that kind of analysis, and that's the difference between this film and Civil War. Just to put a button on what I'm trying to say. But anyway, where were we? The Martha scene. We all know why it works, and as I said, but there's things about it that don't. Now, the problem is, I can see why he said save Martha rather than save my mother. I mean, yeah, it could have been save my mother in the script. But if it was save my mother in the script, and Batman kind of was like, what do you mean, mother? It wouldn't have had that impact. It wouldn't have had that impact. That, I mean, maybe if Pa Kent was still alive and he said, save my parents, then it could have, you know, you're killing my parents, you know. But again, you're killing Martha has just that, as a line, it has a really striking power. Now, I would have thought the really, really best way to have gone about this was, rather than, all in the ultimate cut this happens, rather than all of that time where Clark Kent is investigating the Batman, him, you know, that all of those scenes served to do was make Batman look like more of a badass. They didn't serve anything really significant in the movie. They didn't really tell you too much more about Clark Kent. He didn't get so many more lines. All his lines were kind of like, all his lines didn't tell you anything about him. They just were like other people either speaking to him and telling him about Batman, or it was, you know, they just didn't say much about him. So if he had have used that time to investigate Batman, and then when he heard and figured out Batman was Bruce Wayne, somehow he stumbled across the tragedy that had happened to Bruce Wayne, and he found out about the mother being called Martha, and then that's why at the end of the fight, Superman actually technically would have won the fight by using his brains, because he actually psychologically does it on purpose, saying save Martha, knowing that how that was going to affect Batman. Now that would have been good storytelling. That would have been ABC. So they could have used that time to set up something to make you know, Superman look like he's not just this big, tough, powerful guy, but he's actually got some kind of character and brains to him. And I think that would have been a really, really good way to go, because Superman in the comics, he's not just some idiot. He's a guy who's, you know, he's got a lot of great power, but he's got a mind behind him as well. And it was the same thing, you know, when they just blow up the Senate. That's another terrible Snyder mistake. Stay with the moment just for a single moment. That could have been a Superman speech. Take out those dream sequences, put in a Superman speech where he defends himself to humanity. So again, I'm trying to be very, very fair to this movie, but again, you know, the big point here is, despite all this, there's great things about this movie, as I've pointed out. Batman kills, another deconstruction of a character. Now, Batman killing in this movie is jarring. I think it doesn't really, you know, the sense of it is kind of strange, because here's this guy who cares about, you know, Superman killing all these people in this fight where he was trying to actually save the world, and he's killing himself. So again, I don't know how to defend the Batman killing. I honestly don't. And it's not because that I don't think Batman should be able to kill in movies, but in this specific movie, it can't be justifiable, because once Batman kills, then it takes away from his motivation to want to fight Superman, who he thought had done all this great destruction and killed so many people. So again, although I like the idea of this is an old Batman who's gone over the edge and has become more ruthless, as soon as he crosses that line, he, as a person, has no credibility in criticizing Superman. However, was it so bad, him killing, that I stopped enjoying the movie? No. So again, I'm gonna say I agree with guys who say Batman shouldn't have killed. I don't think Batman should have killed considering the story they were trying to tell, but it wasn't so jarring, and I enjoyed most aspects of the Batman character. I loved what they did in terms of making Bruce Wayne a bit more like the James Bond. I'd never seen that before. I think Ben Affleck, for the most part, you know, although he didn't do anything, and this is what I was going to say, like this scene alone from, I'm going to show you a scene now because I was setting this up. Ain't no way Ben Affleck's better than Christian Bale. I don't even think he's better than Michael Keaton. I think he's about on par with Michael Keaton. Although Michael Keaton didn't get to show off a lot of his range. But there are scenes that, there was not one scene that wasn't, you know, fight choreography in Batman v Superman that impressed me so much about this new Batman. All the scenes that impressed me about this new Batman were all fight choreography or some other kind of, like when he crawled up into the corner, like as if he was a bat, you know, or when Bruce Wayne was flying on the, you know, as a child, he'd fallen down the well and he's flying on the wings of the bat. All of the stuff about Batman that I liked was the kind of, you know, the visual and the fight choreography. Ben Affleck's was serviceable as the kind of vessel that kind of the face of these great visual and fight spectacles that Batman was in. But yeah, like I mean, the subtlety and nuance of Christian Bale in Batman Begins, no way. It blows Ben Affleck out the water. And just look at this scene. Sorry, you're trying to tell me, the nerd man, on with enough prep time, and you don't even have the class. No, you're trying to tell me that Ben Affleck did anything like that as a scene in Batman v Superman? What Christian Bale did there was just, he took us through so many different aspects and sides of the Batman and Bruce Wayne character that, you know, this new James Bond Batman is cool and everything, but you know, essentially the acting is, it's Ben Affleck's best acting, but Ben Affleck's best acting is, it's average, dude. I don't know what to say. It's above average. Like Ben Affleck's best acting on his, if he's giving everything he's got 170%, he still isn't as good as certain actors like Christian Bale or, you know, Caprio or any of those guys. He just still isn't as good as them. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. And so the intro of the Justice League is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. So I was very impressed by Ben Affleck, by the way. Don't get me wrong, he was really, really good. Intro to the Justice League, and the film is overstuffed with characters. This is the last critique of the movie. That I found has been the general critique of Batman v Superman. What can I say about the intro of the Justice League? I mean, what the hell do you want anyway? How did that ruin the movie for you? They introduced the Justice League on a video because that's what, you know, Lex Luthor had. He'd gone. I thought it was realistic. That's what I thought. I thought actually, that's kind of actually generally realistic. That's how, rather than having some kind of weird, like, spectacular thing where they bump into the Flash, maybe they could have made a cool post-credit scene with the Flash instead of doing those videos and then just taken that scene out. But generally speaking, it didn't bother me. It wasn't a scene that I thought was good. It wasn't a scene that I thought was bad. I didn't see how it could be, how people could hate it so much that they're gonna bring it up like, oh, this movie was overstuffed with characters because they did these files. Oh, you won't believe how they introduced the Flash. It was just on a file and who cares? I mean, who cares? It was such a little part of the film. So, no, whatever. And Doomsday and the death of Superman. Now, this is a major problem I have with the movie. Now, I got why he did it. Ballsy as hell. Really, really ballsy. But in hindsight, after thinking about it for quite a while, it was very, very silly and short-sighted of them to kill Superman in this movie. Very, very bad idea, especially if you're gonna take away Clark Kent as well. I think the way the creature looked, they could have just reshot like certain things and just said that was Parasite instead, and nobody would have even minded, because that's kind of like what Parasite looks like. They could have got Scoot McNairy and just like thrown him into that stuff on the Kryptonian ship and mixed him with Zod and Lex and just created Parasite instead, and that would have been more than enough to take on Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Terrible idea to kill off Superman, because they've killed off Superman and Clark Kent, and we all know Superman's going to come back. But how are people going to buy the Clark Kent secret identity? Or are we not going to have Clark Kent anymore? It's just going to be Superman. There's no Clark Kent in this world anymore. Then you rip away the humanity of Superman. When he gets his solo movie, Clark Kent is the heart of Superman. So I thought that was a really, really bad idea. So, then I'm just going to say these last things, literally the 5 things that I think I really love about this movie, and why I think it's, in my personal opinion, it's a flawed but great movie. And again, my thing isn't with the critics, that it's just how much they love, that they've taken joy, that they've really, like bullies, just taking such great happiness in ripping apart these DC movies, instead of constructively criticizing them. They've just, and to me, the thing about this movie, literally, it was such a ballsy move. I told you, it was like a DC graphic novel brought to life. The editing added to that. Why aren't critics saying this? Why aren't critics saying, well, hey, you know what, for as much as I may have not really liked this movie, it's very ballsy for a summer blockbuster to play with all these themes that it had, like all these theological themes, and to have no jokes, and to take itself a little bit more seriously, and to have this kind of great action, and to have these amazing visuals. As a summer movie, I mean, that's pretty out there. And just imagine that even if this wasn't the one for you, just imagine if he had got it right, using all of the stuff he wanted to do, the philosophical aspect, the visual aspect, all of that stuff. If he had got it right, we would be talking about one of the best movies of all time. Because visually, and what it was trying to do was so fascinating. and we should encourage that as moviegoers, rather than going back to the, oh, let's all make the jokes and Aquaman, I hear you talk to fish. We shouldn't want that. That's great for Marvel, and as I said, I enjoy that the kids enjoy that, and they can go and watch that with their parents and all of that. But how about some comic book movies for people, who are above 7 years old and aren't soccer mums, or like, let's have some movies for young guys, for guys in their teens and who are a bit more kind of mature, or going through a little bit more, have a little more edge or grit to them. How about some movies for them? I just think it's very short-sighted us criticizing a movie on being too dark. Batfleck. As I said, not my favorite Batman. These are the 5 things I'm saying. Number 2, Batfleck, not my favorite Batman of all time, but great action, coherent action. This isn't a Batman who would, like I said, like Black Widow, who's gonna try and fight Doomsday in a one-on-one fight and somehow come out as the victor, like Iron Man does with the Hulk, when we all know the Hulk, the angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. So no Hulkbuster should be able to just knock him out. It's stupid. But anyway, number 3, Wonder fucking Woman. And once again, as I said, diversity. The immediately, right off the bat, you've got Cyborg, you've got the Suicide Squad with lots of ethnic characters. You've got Wonder fucking Woman, because she was an amazing Gal Gadot in this movie. Every moment she was on, she was the most comic accurate character in this movie, even more so than Lex Luthor, and just amazing. Amazing. The whole cast was amazing. The whole cast elevated the movie. I think there was Alfred. Holly Hunter hasn't been mentioned ever, and poor woman, she did a great job in this movie. Perry White, Lois Lane was very interesting in this movie, much better than she was in Man of Steel, where it didn't even make sense why she was in that movie at all. Lex Luthor and his PhD was fantastic, as I've told you before. Great writing with Lex Luthor. If you look up some of the references he makes in the movie, it's very, very interesting, and he has an incredibly sinister plot. And he was literally, up until Amanda Waller came, my favorite villain of in a comic book movie of the year. And I still think this Lex Luthor, unfortunately people don't like his performance, and I can understand that. I can understand why, because of the twitching sometimes. I think they're exaggerating a little, but I can understand that they maybe were looking for something else. So I wouldn't say, in the same vein as Amanda Waller, that he's one of the one of the top 10, say, villains in a comic book movie, but I'd certainly put him in the top 15. Anyway, stunning cinematography is number 4. I thought it was absolutely stunning, the cinematography, as you know, and the mythology and philosophy was brilliant, subtle, and the story was not spoon-fed to us. This was a ballsy movie that was either great or had some fantastic ideas in it. Either way you look at it, as I said, if you didn't like it and you're a critic, you've got to at least see that this guy was trying to make an important film that, if it had have worked, would have changed the face of how people make comic book movies today. Really, if this had made over $1 billion and something, you would have seen Marvel start trying to be a bit more darker and take their characters a little more seriously. They would have maybe gone through their Captain America, portfolio, back list of comic books, and looked for some maybe edgier material for him, since Winter Soldier worked so well as well. So again, you know, this was a great piece of film making, and I think it's going to be a cult classic. Going to be a cult classic. Probably not on the same level as Suicide Squad, but it will be a cult classic, I can assure you. And I'd like to thank you for listening to me on Batman v Superman. And the last video I'm going to do is why I think Civil War is vastly overrated. Vastly.